everyone. This is Dario talking again for the last sessions of today. Very busy impact agenda. If I look back at today, well, we start with a vision of the future with hot telecom. We continue talking about the ecosystem in general, and we then took a spotlight in Europe. And meanwhile, we also talked about the major products and components of the wholesale markets, such as voice, roaming, and A2P. Now, there is another session, and one that is very close to our heart, which is talking about A2P and SMS business messaging then again, but the not so good part of it, the fraud element. And by the way, tomorrow we're going to have a similar one on voice as well. I'd like to thank anybody that has been here so far, and welcome for joining us. It's when we counted at 2 o'clock, 400 of you had showed up, which we particularly like. Well done. I think a few more will be added. As you can see, some of you have not yet done the profile settings. With our profiles, people can all see you and reach you and contact. After all, the real reason behind us to be here is to provide a platform for everybody to talk, to discuss, and you can use it. If you go on the left, you've got all those features, the people one, where you can start taking meetings and organizing your chats. You have expos where you can go and meet people. I don't want to tell you too much about these. Today is, after all, the last day, but tomorrow is another one, so you can start again and do it. Well, back to what we were supposed to talk, SMS fraud. There are some big announcements in the industry, and very glad to say that MEF was part of it recently as well. As a matter of fact, you might have noticed that we have a co-host, virtual in this case, in this moderation in this panel, which is the i3 Forum. You might have heard the i3 Forum and MEF are working together on the topic of SMS fraud. But fear not, we have a few people, some of those people that are directly involved on these specifics, and we'll talk about later. But for now, let me introduce to you our panels and our panel members, which magically will appear in front of your eyes as we start now the panel. So first of all, it's a welcome for me to Sandrine Dutertre, the Messaging Security Products Manager from Orange. I have seen appearing Jason Lunn, the SVP of Commercial from IMImobile. I should also welcome Anurag Aggarwal, the Director of Messaging Services at Tata Communications. Aqeel, Ahmed, Senior Product Expert for Messaging and Digital Solutions at Telenor, and John Murtagh, the CTO of Anam Technologies. Welcome to all of you. And please feel free today to tell us all. It's great to have so many voices and so many experts on this topic. Now, going back with the history of A2P messaging, it's a great history. It's an organic growth, one that surprised many. Business messaging has really been a driver so much business. However, this organic growth was not one designed since the beginning with a clear security practice or model in place. So we're now finding ourselves fighting the bad actors, the guys, sometimes the lack of knowledge in the industry as well. What's good and what's bad. Well, this is a fight, but where are we with the fight? Let's ask directly our panels. I'm going to start a bit randomly, but first, it's always nice. I always like to point out that we have women joining our teams, because we've got few women in the industry, or we'd like to see when they are so prepared and well positioned in the industry, like Sandrine. Sandrine, can I ask you, please welcome and unmute yourself and tell us a bit more on where you think we are in this fighting with A2P SMS. Are we winning the fight?
I would say the fight is not won yet, but we are progressing. We are progressing each day. I would say we are still in the middle of the fight. You know that the A2P market is still growing and is forecasted to grow again, at least up to next year, 2021. So we do fight every day, and I think we have made good progress. But fraudsters also are very creative.
It's
so
a creative.
let's go on.
It's a creative bunch out there. Let me ask another part of the industry, which is next to you in my screen, which is Anurag. Anurag from Tata Communications. What's your view of the status so far? Are we winning?
we can never win. I would start on that note, Dario. Hi. Uh, the fight against messaging fraud is somewhat like a fight against crime. It's nothing which can ever be won. It's something which has to be, as Sandrine very rightly said, we are fighting it every day. As I see it, fraudsters, hackers, phishers, scammers, uh, they're all, I mean, sadly, but to a large extent, they're always one step ahead of regulations. Why is that also possible? Because while you have, say, the mobile operators run as large institutions, you have these hackers and professionals and scammers who operate in isolation, and their ability to turn around and be agile in having different formats of creating new forms of fraud is very quick. Here in India, literally, there has been a Netflix documentary which has been made on how a bunch of fraudsters sitting under trees in the rural parts of India were able to fraud the entire country on the largest e-commerce wallet that exists today in India. So that's the level and scale of this fraudulent activity. And if you look at SMS being the most ubiquitous form of communication from enterprises and government to the end customer, definitely this is somewhat always there in the radar of all sorts of negative elements in the society. And it's a constant process where we need to have the best of artificial intelligence, the best of human intelligence all together, constantly combating new formats in which fraud occurs. So yes, it's a fight which can never be fully won. But yes, I would definitely say that the industry is doing a lot. And in the last couple of years, the attention on this facet of fraud in messaging has grown. And I hope to see further improvements in the days to come.
Oh, great. So fighting the beast, as some people have said, you have to fight it every day. Well, we heard from Orange and from Tata. I will include Telenor. Maybe I'll say, let's see if another angle of the word has got a different view. Aqeel, what's your fighting with fraud in SMS? Oh, you are on mute, so unmute yourself. And
okay, can you hear me now? Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, so yeah, I totally agree with Anurag and Sandra said really well that it's a day-to-day task. It's not like that we are winning, but the good thing which I can see now is that that people are very much aware of fraud, and then there are lots of scammers. Because right now we can see a huge amount of increase in our E2P volumes because of this corona impact, because lots of people are using digital platforms. There are lots of information on internet where people are trying to access different platforms. They are putting lots of information, personal information on internet, which makes these hackers and fraudulent people to create new way to penetrate into a network and then try to reach subscriber with very targeted fraudulent activities. So, but yeah, Telenor is trying to also fight with those by having different some of the proactive approaches, and in some of the business unit we are doing very reactive approaches as well. And right now we are very much working to putting lots of our SMS firewall in our business unit where we can, and then trying to do different analytics on the traffic. But again, it's a day-to-day task. It's not like that we are yet there where we can say that our networks are 100% protected. But yeah, we are working in the right direction, I must say.
Well, the three of you to start, and the three of you we've heard that the reality is that, as we expected, fraud is still there and it's big. But slightly positive messages we've heard, I would say across, but something is improving. Maybe we're not winning, at least we're more active. Well, let's talk about some of his activity with John Murtagh, the CTO of Anam. You are at the center of some of his work, you and your firewall and so on. So, John, tell us what's the perspective from your side?
Well, there's never going to be, getting to the final you know, the end of the war, you know, where you have the truce. You know, I think the from our side is it's trying to stay a step ahead, as Anurag mentioned. You know, this is the challenge for us. What we see, obviously, with the growth in business messaging, you know, people are used to communicating with their banks, with their supermarkets, with, you know, all facets of their, you know, with SMS. So because they're used to SMS, the fraudsters have also tried to, especially in the phishing world, try to leverage that trust that the consumer is placing in the channel, because he's not engaging in it. So the social engineering is evolving from the fraudsters. So the challenge for our industry is to build a tool set. You know, some things were mentioned. You know, it's based on analytics. It's based on research. You know, what's going on in the industry. It's based on, you know, testing. It's based on using a whole set of tools to combat and stay ahead. You know, it's like any army that goes into the field. It needs all its tools and its intelligence to fight this fraud.
Well, I've heard from 4 of you. So at this point, Jason, is almost a yes or a no. So the problem is out there, and we need to fight it. As simple as that.
Yeah, I think you called it the beast, Dario, and I think you've been fighting this beast for many years. I guess it's an evolution for everyone. It's a challenge for everyone in this ecosystem who's got to develop and improve and evolve, as well as enterprises understanding that when they write their communications, they don't make themselves look like fraudsters, as an example, because some businesses need to adapt their approach to communicating with their customers. It's every facet of the ecosystem that has to adapt, really. But overall, I agree with what everyone said. Are we seeing some improvements? Oh yeah, big improvements, lots of evolution. Great to see it. I think we all want to maintain an ecosystem that allows flexibility. But unfortunately, flexibility also means that there will always be a gap for fraudsters in one way or another, and we need to make sure we manage and control that in the best way we can. I think we're all trying to do the right thing, and I know a lot of you already signed up to the code of conduct that MEF has, and we want more people signing up to that process and using the fraud form on the back of it, which talks about all the different fraud types. But a fraudster doesn't look at the rules. They have no rule book, as Anurag was saying. They take the rule book, they tear it up, and just look for something different. Look for a way to, if the rule book's there, look for a way to exploit the rule book and find another way in. And that's for all of us to try and do what we can within our own businesses to try and address that and make sure that fraud is minimized as much as possible.
Well, okay, in case there was questions out there, the industry confirms that we really have to do something about fraud. And I think I'll just ask the team if we can put together the link to the fraud framework, which is mentioned by Jason right now. Because I think as an industry, we need to start probably referring to the same type of fraud. And by the way, today we're talking about all of them. It could be from gray routes to actually fraud to the end users and phishings out there. So if you have additional questions, do use the question and answer area and let us know through the chat what else you would like to ask to the team. But so Jason, you mentioned a few things, and so I will have to start exactly on that topic and bring Anurag here as well, because we established that there is a problem out there. Now, a lot of people are doing something about it. And recently, we've heard about the i3 forum, where Tata is also taking part. There was a press release saying that the few operators are also getting together to looking at messaging, looking at A2P fraud in a much closer area. And I should say as well that we're doing that with MEF. Now, Anurag, in your double role, can you explain us a bit more what these and what is the collaboration, what is the i3 Forum doing? And then I will ask Jason then to follow up and say a few more words of what we're doing at MEF itself.
Thank you, Dario. So first and foremost, I'd just like to inform that even Sandrine is part of the i3 Forum messaging fraud work group. So you have actually 2 members here. And it's a pleasure to see her also for the first time face to face. We've all had online calls. The i3 Forum, which is, as I understand, has primarily been focusing more on the voice side, on the signaling side, and the typical carrier functionalities, has not really been very active in the messaging space, as I understand it. It's a fairly old and reputed organization, but has association, but has not really focused much on the messaging angle. And I think this also comes with the fact that SMS is lagging behind voice when it comes to maturity of the industry, whether from a process perspective, from a player's perspective, from a commercial modeling perspective. We are sort of catching up onto the plateau which already with the voice industry has reached. So what happened in the last 6 months is that given the very facet that messaging fraud is a growing concern, and how the importance of messaging has never been felt this much before, especially in the times of this pandemic, when you had a lot more online transactions taking place, a lot more focus on e-commerce, a lot more focus on government updates reaching the and I won't just say end consumer, I'll say the end citizen out here. So you're talking about governments having to reach not just the urban parts of the country or the world, or especially the rural parts. So SMS has been the most ubiquitous form of communication, and that's what has brought the i3 Forum's attention onto it. And at the same time, we've had a very long and well-going chapter of voice fraud. I believe Katya, from our colleague from BIX, has a session tomorrow related to the same. And similarly, we decided to get onto the part of looking at messaging fraud. Now, who better to start with but then to go to our dear MEF, which has been again one of the very, I'll say, the flag bearer of trying to instill the best practices. And now wearing my MEF hat for a second. So I'm very happy that we have a very strong code of conduct, which the likes of Jason have helped in instituting. And it's good to see how more and more different elements of the entire value chain are starting to sign and adopt this code of conduct. So we thought that it's the best if we could have industry forces combined, because the sum total is greater than 1, and look at how we can leverage the best practices already established by MEF, so that we are not reinventing the wheel. So we've had Robert of CLX earlier present once to the i3 Forum as well. And we've taken that as a foundation and as a guiding principle to further expand on what we feel from a carrier perspective on what all should be done to control messaging fraud. With that perspective in mind, we've had the chapter now for almost over 6 months now. It's progressing well. And we are seeing in the coming times how MEF and i3 Forum can collaborate, have their names stay together on the single document, and make sure that we help in having more and more adoption from different parts of the overall ecosystem, signing up to this code of conduct, adopting and understanding the fraud framework, and making sure that we have the best practices and systems in place to combat messaging fraud. So that's the i3 Forum angle of it.
Well, then you introduced him already, but Jason, can you tell us a bit more of the history for people that are not aware of the MEF code of conduct and what it means?
Yes, yeah. So MEF Code of Conduct, it's quite old now, coming up for when we started the messaging program, probably 5 years ago or thereabouts. And it was one of the bits of work that we spent a lot of time on building that Code of Conduct. And there are a few things in there that have moved on in the industry. It hasn't stayed still for 5 years. And so, we are evolving that Code of Conduct now. I know there are a number of members that have signed up, but We'd like more members to sign up. We'd like operators to try and take it as a minimum standard where it's applicable. There are lots of places where we can use this and collaborate together as an industry for trying to get best practice. And that the work at the moment that myself, Joanne from MEF, you just mentioned Anurag Robert from Cinch, and Edwin was on a session this morning from Vonage. Between the four of us, we've been changing the code of conduct to make it more acceptable to members, both present and future. Lots of feedback from members as well in that process, which has been great. So we're putting all that in there to hopefully get a document that is more acceptable to the wider ecosystem, and get that out as soon as we can, really. But I think the thing that goes with that is the fraud framework that I know a lot of you have probably downloaded. I think Dario mentioned earlier, in the last 6 months, there have been about 1,300 or over 1,300 downloads of the fraud framework from the MEF site, which is significant and shows that, we are doing the right thing. Together, we are getting there. Last week, being on the GSMA's fraud and security group sessions, I don't know who else was there, but the fraud framework was on some slides there being used by Optus and Mobile. I mean, them showing some of the fraud that was happening in Australia. And so you can sort of see how our framework as MEF is being used and adopted by the whole ecosystem. So please go and get a copy. Let's use it. Any input you want to improve that, then yeah, please bring it on, and let's collaborate as much as we can, really, Dario.
Yeah, it's a bestseller. It's for free. What more can you ask from that? But the serious read, which is actually the code of conduct and the framework about what is and how we segment the different fraud. I thank you, Jason. Perfect introduction. But now the proof is in the pudding, they say in English. So what's really happening? I mean, the code of conduct has been around for some of them. We have one operator that has taken the code of conduct as a signatory and is using it right now. And so let's ask them, Aqeel from Telenor. Tell us more of what's your experience of the code of conduct.
Yeah, no, I think it's really good initiative from MEF, and I think it's really good to collaborate with all the stakeholders in the whole value chain to agree on a minimum standard. What should it bring to in this whole messaging domain? But right now, obviously, at Telenor side, we have gone through those code of conduct, and obviously we haven't signed it yet, but we are more interested to know that how many aggregators or the content providers, how many of them have signed those, because those are the ones who are initiating or originating most of the content towards the MNOs. On MNO side, we are doing lots of activities like putting up SMS firewall. We are in the beginning, our strategy was to bring more and more aggregators to connect on our gateways. But right now we have changed it to minimize the interconnects to our MNOs, and only doing the partnership with those aggregators who are trustworthy, who are ensuring that the right white traffic terminated into a network. And then also we are also trying to focus more on ensuring that our contracts are written in such a way that the enterprises, the OTTs, those are follow different standards, like instead of sending unknown sender IDs, they should use alphanumeric sender IDs to which is more engaging towards a subscriber. So I think these are the activities which Telenor is doing right now. But I really would like to have a minimum standard where everybody in this whole ecosystem are aligned that this is the minimum standard everybody should follow. Yeah, so I really see that there is a value where we can where everybody have sign this code of conduct, which MAF is working right now. But I really looking forward that more and more aggregators and enterprises making sure that they are following those standards.
Well, that's a great feedback, and I think if I can summarize so far as well, we have some very good starting point, which is the industry starting to talk the same language. It's with the framework itself. We are not spending hours and hours trying to define what is
very correct.
The code of conduct. They say, Aqeel says, we need more people, we need more signatories, more aggregators. So Jason, Anurag, myself, we have more work to do to make sure. And actually, everybody watching right now, have a look and consider, because that could be the future of our industry. But let's pretend that you don't want to do that. I don't see why. But let's ask instead, Sandrine. Sandrine, obviously Orange, you are with, and I should mention all of them, AT&T, BICS, DT, Lank, Orange obviously, OTE, PCCW, Sparkle and Tata. I think those are the messaging in the messaging fraud group, working group in the i3 forum. But let me ask you something, not about the i3 forum, but what if a carrier would go out there and say, I need to do something by myself? What is your recipe? What would you suggest in general? One thing that I've heard before in the Fighting the Beast, you actually say that there's it's an ecosystem problem, but operator could and should do something about it, right?
Yeah, indeed, it's the ecosystem is really, really complex, as we already discussed, and you know, there are a lot of actors in the market, in the A2P market. We have the brands, we have the aggregators, we have a hub. So I think it's very complex for a mobile operator to manage this on its own. It has quite a lot of other topics to deal with, for sure. Moreover, as we said, we have fraudsters, which are who are very smart. They are very reactive. We can see on the market that we are blocking one kind of fraud, and just a few hours later there is a new case coming. It's really a day-by-day work. You have to do analysis each day. So I think the mobile operator really need a reliable partner to help them to fight against this fraud, to this bypass, and get the monetization of their SMS. So this is one of the main topics Orange is working on, of course, monetization, but also to improve the quality of the routes. Aqeel just before talked about, you know, the messages coming through, you know, the origin of a message which has been transformed, which is not finally alphanumerical, but another way. So we need to improve the quality to protect the revenue. We also need to comply with the regulation, which is quite complex in some areas of the world. In some countries, the regulation constraints are quite strong. So again, we need to support the mobile operator on this because it's a big part, and within Orange, the legal department works also hardly on this regulation aspect. So I think altogether, and this is also the objective of the MEF and the i3 forum discussions, is to together really try to improve the quality and finally the customer satisfaction, the subscriber customer care.
Well, thank you, Sandrine. Well, I'm having a look at some of the question in the chat, and obviously something is already happening out there. I see Stuart Mitchell, thanks Stuart, saying there are two sides to SMS fraud, and it would be fantastic to make sure that we cover both. One, where the MNO is defrauded, so the grey routes, inboxes, etc., and number two, where the public subscribers are defrauded, so the phishing, the premium messaging. So thank you, Stuart. As a matter of fact, somebody that in our preparation chat was mentioning exactly the same questions was John. So I will ask with him and say, John, what's your view? Obviously, there are two sides what is Anam doing? What can Anam do, and then the rest of the industry do to cover both?
Yeah, it is very correct from Stuart. There is definitely two categories of fraud, out there, and there's quite different incentives, for each category. Whereas, on the grey route market, the incentive is to make more margin, or is to, it's a commercial incentive to defraud the terminating carrier. It's not necessarily somebody who's under the tree trying to steal your identity. So it's quite different actors involved. Luckily, from a defense system, it's a fight against both. So from a defense system, there is many things you can do. And there's technical systems that you can put in place. Some of them may be mentioned by Aqeel, by firewalls. You can also put in controls on different equipments that you are passing or processing the SMS messages. Simple things like, don't allow alphanumeric messages from international circuits. To only allow them from your circuits where the brand is known to come from that circuit. So there's some simple controls that people can do to reduce or make the window smaller. That's both for the bypass fraud and as well as for the subscriber level fraud.
Well, so John, finish it.
Yeah, and again, there's many tools. From Anam's perspective, we're a vendor which is engaged on the network side. The tools are actually the same to fight both types. In fact, it's the incentive to invest in the revenue leakage for the operators. It gives a large incentive for them to invest, because they themselves are losing money on the grey routes, but with the same systems, they can also protect their own customers and their own brands, because their brands do suffer when their own customers do suffer.
Well, yeah, and just to add on, sorry to cut you, Dario, and just to add on to what John is mentioning, because that's how MNO looks when they are investing into new system, because they want to see what's in it for me. There are one thing about the user experience, then the brand is one thing. But whenever the operators, the MNOs want to invest into a system, they want the commercial benefits out of it, and then having an SMS firewall is I think one of the key driver to protect the network from the fraudsters, as well as it gives also lots of commercial benefits to categorization of SMSs and to make sure that they are used proper channels to terminate into our network, so the operators can make more margins, because right now there are lots of SIM boxers into the network. There are lots of unauthorized routes. So I think the tools are really important and play a very important role in this whole and controlling this fraudulent thing into the network.
Right.
Yeah. Again, as I mentioned, Aqeel, like the tools are just not one tool. It's not simple. It's not just enough to have a firewall. You need the tools around it. The firewall it's only the enforcement point, but you do actually need the tools to assist you in this fight. You need analytical tools, you need testing tools, you need your revenue assurance and fraud department IT systems. There's plenty of tools that are available to combat this.
Yeah, I agree.
Anurag, you started replying in our chat. Unfortunately, people from Umbrella, we have a big group, can't see it. Can you probably elaborate a bit more on these points? Which you say it's a fair point. There are two sides of fraud, or as you would like to say, the framework where we have in MEF goes into much more details, but more on that later.
Sure. Firstly, hi to Stuart. It's good to see you in the audience, though I can't see you, but good to have you there. yes, as it's been mentioned out here, that there are two aspects of fraud, and I think we've covered it to some extent. One is the end user, the individual getting defrauded in some forms, and the other is the operator getting defrauded. We've covered a large part of it in the first part. If you look at it from the code of conduct angle also, and from what I've understood from the code of conduct, I'm sure there are more interpretations of it, but a large part of the code of conduct focuses on trying to help, and Jason, please keep me honest here, but I feel that it's more focused on making sure that the customer, especially the end user, is especially not defrauded. So the expectations are from the originators, the intermediary parties, and the operators to make sure that necessary checks and balances are done to avoid defrauding the end subscriber. That's what I understand as one of the major aspects of it. And the other aspect which Stuart talks about is also that how are MNOs getting defrauded, the part one which you're mentioning. So I think when we have the likes of John here in the panel, Tata works closely with Anam, and we're very proud to partner with them. So I think they already have mentioned a lot about it. And I can just add one part more to what John and Aqeel were saying. And that's related to that. It's great to have the best of firewalls in your system, but if you don't have the right driver in the driver's seat actually running the firewall, then it's as good as having a highly paid security guard who's sleeping. So it's very important. One is to have the right tools to be able to counter fraud, but those tools are only as good as the people who are using them. So, for example, if an individual has a ladder in front of him but doesn't know how to climb or use a ladder, then the person is not actually making use of a very efficient tool in front of him. So, likewise, the biggest challenge which we've seen, and I'd like to quote Mobile Squared here, a very well-known research analyst house, and we at MEF work very closely with Mobile Squared, I know. So, they did a recent study of the impact of fraud on messaging. And what it comes out is that, so the good part is that the tipping point seems to be around 2020, when from about 400 plus operators, we are slowly moving on to about 500 plus operators who are now installing SMS firewalls into their system. That's the first part. That's like half the battle won. The bigger challenge which we are now seeing is that a lot of these operators have yet not brought in the right practices to or the right managed services to run the firewall well. And which is why it's very important. I'm sure Aqeel, as a mobile operator group, would be looking into this aspect as well. But it's very important that either operators have their own police force, so to say, who are constantly monitoring and checking for fraudulent activity or grey route activity, SIM-box activity, etc. Or they have the likes of, say, like an Anam, who offer their own managed services as well, and bring some expert into the fold who's able to actively make use of the ladder which they are installing into your system. So that's very important, and I think that's what covers toward your points 1 and 2 about how the enterprises or the wholesalers, the carriers are getting impacted in the middle, and how the end customer needs to also take action, or rather the actions we need to take to avoid end customers getting defrauded.
Hi, I was going to say that I agree with around the service provision part of the firewalls. It's great having systems that can control, but unless you have the teams with the right knowledge, actually, I wouldn't say it's pointless, but it defeats the purpose of having the firewall there. You do need this team to help support and maintain and grow and improve that every single day. It can't stand still. What I was going to say, about those 2 points, though, again, I'll refer back probably to the fraud framework that everyone can go and get a copy of from the MEF site. And that splits out those different fraud types. So, on the MNO side, there's the SMSC compromise fraud and SIM farms and SCCP, global title faking, those kind of things, as well as on the consumer side. But there is also a side which, even just sticking to the A2P side that we started this conversation on, which is around mobile operators and consumers being defrauded. because the mobile operator is itself an enterprise, and I don't know what happens in every territory. I assume it's very similar. But if I pick the UK, I can see fraudsters hopping from one operator to another, and when they can't get through those operators, they find a new technique and then hop back through all the mobile operators again, and you see this same pattern reoccurring over and over again. And so, yeah, we're still thinking about the consumer here because they are paying the operator, really. So it's down to their revenue that means the operator's in existence today.
Great, and I think I already see that we're doing great with chat with each other, but and the people watching us. But time is running out. I need to ask a very important question myself before I forget, because in the end, I really would like to get something out. And already we have seen and established that there is a need to working together. Something is happening, and we've been talking more now about. Is there a secret recipe that you could all share? Well, maybe not secret, it won't be now, but what would be the way, at least, to start, to show the best practice out there? So I will start with Sandrine, if that's okay. Sandrine, we've seen how in the last few years you've done a lot at Orange. One thing that caught my attention that I probably like, if you want to quote, is your idea that you say that anti-fraud offers should be consistent in proposing different levels of services. Can you explain that more, and then tell us a bit more about your secret recipe or how to deal with fraud?
Okay, so I think some points have been just discussed a few minutes earlier. I really think the success relies on several elements. It's not just one, it's a compilation of several things, I would say. First, you need to really have a good knowledge of the market and an updated knowledge of the market, because it's moving so fast that you really need to be well connected every time. After, we just discussed, well, Anurag discussed, and it was already approved by Jason and Aqeel, but you have the machine, you have the SMS firewall, and also, as John said, you have the tools. But here, what is key is the human factor. You really need experts, because having a machine is one thing, but if you don't know how to manage it, it won't be efficient. So you really need to rely on security experts, on SMS security experts. It's quite difficult to find this kind of experts on the market because they are very, very specific, very qualified. So we have to find them and then to work with them. And also with the tools evolution, it's a key point also. After how do we work within Orange, to answer your question? First, I think we have to know the market we are going to work with. So we have one mobile operator. We study this country, and we perform like an audit, of a network to understand what is the main fraud case in this market, because we have several customers and some of them are suffering SIM boxes a lot. Some of them, it's a rather domestic gray route, depending, not always the same. So first to begin the project, and later, once the firewall is installed, 3 months, 6 months, or 1 year later, the idea is to regularly perform a new audit. As we said at the very beginning of this discussion, it's not something we can win. So I would say reaching 100% to eradicate all fraud is a bit like an utopia. It's a very, very difficult to reach, not to say impossible, but the idea, of course, is to drop this fraud, let's say maybe from 30-40% at the start to less than 10%, if possible, less than 5%. But the idea within Orange is really to build this partnership and the trust between us and the mobile operator to fight against the fraud system. So I don't know if it's a secret recipe, but we have tried.
Well, thank you, Sandrine. Aqeel, your experience across mobile operators here, I would invoke not just Telenor, but in the past KPN and mobile. From all of those experience, would you add something to what Sandrine have said? What else could an operator think or do differently?
Yeah. I think one of the key learnings which I have from my experience is that I think if we can manage to reduce the number of entry points into a network, I think it really help in understanding the traffic, how the traffic is terminated, because earlier we have on international signaling, there are lots of roaming agreements, there are lots of AA19 mutual forgiveness, there are a number of aggregators who are or enterprises connected on international links. Right now, what we are trying to do, we are consolidate all the entry points into the network over international signaling, over domestic channels, there are hundreds of large accounts connected on SMSCs on the domestic operators. So right now, what we are trying to do, we are trying to consolidate all those connections, and we are only partnering with our trusting with the aggregators which are more trustworthy and which have more better collaboration with Telenor and have better processes with Telenor. And on top of that, we are working different vendors. Anam is one of our partners for which we are deploying the firewalls. And then on top of that, as Anurag mentioned, and other people are mentioning that obviously it's very much important to have a right skill set, right people who are driving those boxes. So I think these are the steps which is really important to control the volumes or the A2P traffic and terminating into the network.
Thanks, Aqeel. Well, we've asked the operators, and now very quickly I'd like to ask Jason as well. Jason, what does or could an aggregator do to make sure that fraud is controlled?
I've been trying to think about the best approach for this one. For a while we've developed our techniques, and I think one of the key things, or probably two key things really. First one is around educating your customers, because there's a lot around different clients who will submit traffic that may or may not be appropriate, and they just need to understand a little bit around what is legitimate and what they should or shouldn't they be doing. And that's on the back of your own agreements with the mobile operators. You've got to be able to adhere to all those controls that you're being asked to deliver against. And one of the ways that we do that is we look at our clients and we segregate them into different categories. There's some customers who are in categories where they're allowed lots of flexibility because we know they have lots of controls within their business. Let's say like a bank. A bank generally is a very trusted business. It has lots of controls, lots of rigor, lots of training for its colleagues, and actually it's quite a well-trusted position that you're in with that client. So we trust those clients as well because we know they never transpose or transport fraud in any way. So they're really very good, well behaved. And then you move into a category where there's a little bit of fraud, and then there's probably a high probability of fraud. And so depending on the classification, we apply different rules basically within our filters to assist in blocking that traffic. So where it's obviously a high probability of fraud, and that might be where businesses don't have all those controls in place, then they may go through several sets of controls in our systems before we would pass it on to an operator. So it seems quite restrictive in some ways, but that process is there in terms of segregating customers into these different environments to make sure that we protect all of us, my family, your family, everyone's family from this fraud as much as possible. I think, as we said earlier, we'll never stop it all, but we'll certainly try to stop the majority.
John, I'd like you to add something briefly as time is almost running out, but could you tell us what your secret recipe would be from Anam?
I'll summarize as 3 layers. There's systems, of course, so firewall systems. So some brief point is security by design. So all messages will terminate through the operator. So that's a central place, and is to have 360 degrees of all entry points into your network. That's where the security needs to happen. Also, tools we talked about, I won't repeat, but you need the tools. Whoever is doing the job of the fighting needs the tools, need the correct tools, need the best tools. You need to invest in new technologies like the drive automation, like things like machine learning. We in Anam have seen a huge benefit from that. Other tools on the SIM-box detection that make things more automated. It's quite a complex fraud perpetuation. And then finally is people, experts, absolutely, but there's also a culture to drive, about cyber security. If you can drive that message of fraud is bad, to report fraud, employees of an operator can report fraud because they have, thousands of employees, so they're also receiving the fraud. They report internally. Change the processes to have more engagement between customer care departments and security departments to get those controls in place. So it's basically systems, tools, and people. That's the secret recipe.
Well, okay. As I said before, no secret anymore. Here we go. But thanks for making it clear. And education is a big part of everything we do, and sharing
awareness, yeah.
So,
and the other thing I'd like to mention, Dario, is for A2P, please don't offer it for really cheap or put a price on its value. It will and secure that those channels where the price is. That in itself, it won't solve it, but it does help.
Price itself helped the A2P not to end up like email after all. So it's a much better situation. I think that we had more questions we cannot answer. One of them I will mention because I think it's a valid point, as once again, to educate and to share. It's for Michal from I won't try and pronounce your surname, Michal, in Polish. I think I'm struggling in languages as it stands. But you're saying there's a new fraud sending SMS from infected phones to exotic foreign numbers like Russia or Asia, and these is actually something that you are now seeing, which is terminating this move available number range. How can we stop these? Interestingly, I will just point it at somebody else panel very easily. Tomorrow there is a panel on security for voice, and interestingly, voice includes also numbering, just like you mentioned there as well. And there is our colleagues from RAG are testing a blockchain solution as well. I think Anurag, you just mentioned that as well, and similarly you have something in India, I think, on blockchain. So there are solutions available out there. We would love to talk more about this specific problem as well, because that's what we do on MAF and what we do as a community. We look at things as they arise and trying to give an answer. However, in the next 5 minutes, I don't think it'll give you enough time to any of you to do a proper answer to these problems. So, Michael, sorry. But I'd like it to end in something slightly more positive, if I may ask, because so far I've heard a somber but very positive story still, which is we have a problem, and the problem is there. We probably need to deal with it together. And already there are good signs in the different parts of the industry coming together and talking the same language, etc. Now, we also have tools. We need to have processes and people, as I've heard before from John. So it's a question of multiple things that needs to be bring together. And now, tell me, because you've said something at the beginning, that things are improving. After putting so much effort, something is getting better. And so let's end up on a positive note. Let me ask telegraphically, because we'll be running out of time soon. What is the good news you'd like to share with people watching right now? I'll ask Sandrine first. Sandrine, what's your good news to share?
Well, several of them, but I would say the most important. We've been arranged one securing the network through all what we discussed. The system, the tools, and the people. We can see the traffic multiplied by 3 or 4 in some network because they had such a lot of bypass and fraud at the beginning. So I think it's a very good news, even if we don't reach 100% efficiency because it's so hard to reach. I think we do quite a lot of progress, and with these initiatives from the MEF and the i3 Forum, I think we are really in the good direction. So I'm confident.
Great. Aqeel, I'll follow with you. What would you add?
Yeah, I think as Sandrine mentioned that there is a drastic increase in volumes this year in A2P business. So that's really good for the MNOs and we see the value of to invest in this A2P business. So I think that the good news is that there is a potential in this business, and we see that whatever the projection MAF and Mobile Square did in the past, it seems to be true in future as well. Because earlier we were questioning about the projection which people are doing, that there are this is the how big is this A2P business is. And how much potential in this A2P messaging, because SMS is dying. But now people are realizing that that there is a potential in messaging. There is still potential in investing in this business.
Oh, great. John, can you add something positive?
Yeah, I think very simply, the positive is the amount of money you can make by securing your network. There's a massive potential. We know that from when we look at some networks, we can see there's a massive amount of grey routes, and by investing in solving the grey route issue, you're also solving the general subscriber fraud. You just do you're using the revenue to invest in combating the brand reputation.
What about the news when there is more money in there if you are secure? Could that's an incentive for us all? Jason, I follow you as well. Your good news.
Yeah, so I agree, John. I think there is something in there for the whole industry in terms of securing, and there's revenue opportunity for everybody there. But I think the big thing for myself really has been the success of the MEF registry process and where that's gone, Dario. That's great to see. Again, it is that industry collaboration. It is UK finance, UK government, the messaging industry, and the operators and banks all pulling together to deliver this solution. And now, we have a place where I remember the first session with UK finance a few years ago, and there was lots of continuity issues, shall we say, across the banks in the UK, as well as government agencies. All that's been pulled together. The supply chain is now understood. They know who's doing what. And we've seen a massive decrease in sender ID fraud in that UK market as a consequence of the MEF registry process. So again, please, let's use the code of conduct, use MEF, let's work together and deliver these solutions everywhere we can, really.
It can be done. Together we can. It seems to be the straight line.
Yeah.
Anurag, what would you add to that then?
I guess it's the toughest to answer last. A lot of news has already been shared. It feels we won the fight and won the war. I'll just say that John had articulated it very well in terms of systems, processes, and people, if I have to put it in that way, sir. And I think what's coming about well, which he touched upon in the end, but which is most integral, is culture, or what I would like to call intent. And when I say intent, it's not just the all us private players in the organizations, but also the regulators in the overall ecosystem. If I take an Indian context, for example, we have the DLT, the distributed ledger technology, which has come about, and it has become, the impact is so prevalent that won't name anyone, but I know some of the largest international OTTs today are struggling to send the same cheap traffic which they were sending just a month ago. So the good news is that the intent is there. The systems have been placed. The right people are already managing it, and processes are being laid down so that all ecosystem members are effectively working in a united manner, and forums are working together. So I'm sure that all the synergies that we see together between different players of the ecosystem, I think that's what's required, and it's happening well. So cheers to that.
Well, great. So we heard the good news. The bad news is we're running out of time, so I need to say goodbye to you. But we end up on a fantastic note that the IFA Forum MEF, every members out there, that everybody outside there seems to be noticing the importance of fraud. So well done. And good work to all of you. It seems you have a lot coming up. So I hope we will hear more of all the different developments on the different sites. So thank you to Aqeel Ahmed from Telenor, from John Murtagh from Anam, from Jason Lunn from IMImobile, from Anurag Aggarwal from Tata Communication, and Sandrine Dutertre from Orange. Thank you all. And I hope to see you soon.